The Council's betrayal. For many years, humanity worked hard to earn its place in the galaxy. After discovering faster-than-light travel, humans joined the Galactic Council, a powerful alliance of alien species that ruled most of the known galaxy. The Council was made up of the oldest, richest, and strongest alien empires. At first, they welcomed humans, impressed by their intelligence and creativity. Humans were helpful. They shared new technologies, built trade routes, and solved problems no other species could. For years, humanity proved itself. Earth's representatives believed they had earned the Council's respect, but they were wrong. The betrayal came during a meeting at the Council Hall, a massive space station that floated above a blue alien planet. Inside, the Council leaders, strange creatures with glowing eyes, sharp scales, and tentacles, sat on golden thrones in a great circular chamber. Humans sat in the center, surrounded by the alien leaders who towered above them. Earth's representative, Ambassador Lee, stood confidently as she spoke about a new plan to help the galaxy. Her voice echoed in the hall. Humanity believes that by working together, we can make a better future for everyone. The room was silent for a moment. Then, a deep, rumbling voice broke the stillness. It came from High Chancellor Valruk, the leader of the Council. His skin was dark and rough like stone, his eyes glowing red. He rose slowly from his throne, looking down at the humans with a cold, empty expression. "Humans," Valruk said, his voice loud and heavy. "We thank you for your time in the Council, but your time is over." Ambassador Lee froze. "What do you mean?" The aliens around her began to whisper in strange languages. Valruk raised his hand, and the whispers stopped. "The Council has voted. Humanity is dangerous. Your kind spreads too quickly. Your inventions disrupt the balance of power. You will no longer be part of the Council." Lee's face turned pale. "This must be a mistake. We've only helped the Council. We've worked hard too." "Enough." Valruk's voice boomed, shaking the chamber. "We do not need your help anymore. Your kind will return to Earth. You will stay there, under our watch, and you will never leave again." The humans in the room looked at each other, shocked and confused. For years, the Council had pretended to be allies, but now their true feelings were clear. Ambassador Lee tried to argue, her voice shaking with anger. "You can't do this. This is betrayal. Humanity deserves better." Valruk's lips curled into a cruel smile. "Betrayal? No, this is justice. Humanity is a threat, and we will make sure that threat is contained." Back on Earth, the news spread like wildfire. Videos of the Council's announcement played on every screen. People gathered in the streets, in homes, and in offices, watching the betrayal unfold. Families cried as images of Earth's colonies in space were shown under attack. Council warships, huge and terrifying, appeared out of nowhere, destroying human stations and ships with powerful lasers. Cities on Earth were in chaos. People ran in panic as Council patrol ships entered the skies, blocking satellites and communications. Earth was being cut off from the rest of the galaxy. In a dark underground bunker, Earth's leaders sat around a long table, watching the chaos on their screens. General Marcus, a tall and battle-hardened man, slammed his fist on the table. "We trusted them. We worked with them. And this is how they thank us." President Hayes, the leader of Earth, leaned forward. Her face was calm, but her eyes burned with anger. "They think we are weak. They think they can control us. What do we do?" One of the advisors asked nervously. "We don't have the power to fight them." President Hayes looked at General Marcus. "Is the project ready?" Marcus gave a slow nod. "It's ready." The room fell silent. For years, Earth had been preparing for something like this, a secret project, something hidden from the Council's eyes. President Hayes stood up and spoke firmly. "The Council made a mistake. They think humanity will bow down and stay silent. But they don't know us. They don't know what we've been building. General Marcus smiled faintly. They aren't ready for what's coming. Far above Earth, in the Council's warships, alien commanders watched the planet below. They believed their job was done. They believed humans would surrender. But deep beneath Earth's surface, in hidden hangars and secret bunkers, the Vengeance fleet was waking up. Massive warships, built in secret, hummed to life. Thousands of human soldiers prepared for battle. Engineers checked weapons and engines, ready to launch at a moment's notice. Humanity had been betrayed, but they weren't broken. As Earth's leaders stared at the screens, watching the Council's ships in the skies, President Hayes said one final thing. They think this is over. They have no idea what's coming for them. Earth in chaos. Earth had fallen into chaos. The skies above the planet were filled with Council patrol ships, dark, massive, and terrifying. They hovered like silent predators, blocking all human satellites. Communications to the colonies were cut off. Humans couldn't send or receive messages to space anymore. The Galactic Council had truly isolated humanity. In every major city on Earth, people filled the streets. Some cried, some screamed, and some demanded answers. Cities were crowded with chaos. Cars stuck in endless traffic, stores closed, and emergency sirens blaring. Fear spread like wildfire. In a small house in New York City, 12-year-old Sammy watched his mother cry. They sat in their living room, staring at the screen. The news played footage of human colonies in space being destroyed. Giant Council warships fired lasers that cut through space stations like paper. Ships filled with human families tried to escape, but the Council hunted them down. A reporter's voice spoke through the noise. The Council has declared humanity a threat. Our colonies are under attack, and Earth is surrounded. This is no longer just politics. This is war. Sammy looked at his mother. Mom, are they going to come here too? His mother wiped her tears and hugged him tightly. Don't worry, Sammy. Humans are strong. We always fight back. Far underground, in a hidden bunker, the leaders of Earth gathered. The room was filled with generals, engineers, and top scientists. Massive screens showed the chaos happening across the planet. At the head of the table stood President Hayes, the strong-willed leader of Earth. Next to her was General Marcus, the man leading Earth's military forces. The Council wants us to believe this is the end, President Hayes said, her voice calm but firm. But they don't know us. General Marcus stepped forward. We've been preparing for this day. For years, we knew the Council might betray us, so we built a weapon they've never seen before. The room grew quiet. The generals and advisors stared at Marcus. The Vengeance fleet, he continued, a hint of pride in his voice. Our secret fleet of warships, built underground, hidden from the Council's eyes, powerful enough to challenge their forces. A scientist raised his hand nervously. General, are we ready to launch it? The Council has technology far beyond ours. Marcus smiled faintly. That's what they think. They believe humans are weak. But we've studied their ships, their weapons, their tactics. We've improved. Humanity doesn't just survive. We adapt. The Vengeance fleet is proof of that. In the hangars deep below Earth's surface, the Vengeance fleet sat in darkness. These were not ordinary ships. They were bigger, faster, and stronger than anything humanity had ever built before. Rows of massive warships, each glowing with blue energy, hummed quietly as engineers prepared them for launch. Soldiers in armored suits marched in perfect rows, ready for the fight ahead. Their faces were calm, their eyes filled with determination. They knew what was at stake. Humanity has been betrayed, their commander shouted, his voice echoing through the hangar. But we will not run. We will not hide. We will show the galaxy what happens when you push us too far. The soldiers raised their fists and shouted in unison. The sound was deafening. High above Earth, in the Council's warships, alien commanders watched the planet below. Commander Zoril, a tall alien with gray skin and glowing green eyes, smirked as he spoke to his crew. Humans are panicking. Their cities are in chaos. They are weak. They will surrender soon. His officers laughed. They believed Earth was beaten. Suddenly, a radar officer looked up, his face full of confusion. "Commander, I'm detecting movement beneath Earth's surface." Zorl frowned. "What kind of movement?" "Ships," the officer said, his voice shaking. "Dozens of them. No, hundreds. They're rising from underground." Commander Zorl's smile disappeared. "What? That's impossible. Humans don't have that kind of technology." The officer stared at the screen, his hands trembling. "They do now." Back in the bunker, General Marcus and President Hayes stood side by side. On the screen, they watched the Council's warships circling Earth. "It's time," President Hayes said softly. General Marcus nodded and turned to his officers. "Launch the Vengeance Fleet." A loud alarm echoed through the underground hangars. Massive metal doors began to open, shaking the ground above. The Vengeance Fleet roared to life. Engines glowed blue, and warships slowly began to rise from the Earth's surface. All across the planet, people looked up to the sky. For the first time in days, hope returned to their eyes. Humanity was fighting back. On the Council's ships, alarms blared as hundreds of human warships appeared on their screens. The alien commanders watched in shock as the Vengeance Fleet rose into space, engines burning bright. "Impossible," Commander Zorl whispered. The humans had been quiet for days, but now they were ready. They had weapons, they had ships, and they had something far more powerful: the will to survive. As the Vengeance Fleet moved into formation, President Hayes sent one final message to the Council. "You thought we were weak. You thought we would surrender. You were wrong." The screen went black. In the skies above Earth, the first human warships opened fire. The Vengeance Fleet awakens. The first shots fired by Earth's Vengeance Fleet lit up the dark skies. Beams of blue energy streaked through space, hitting the massive Council warships. For the first time in history, humanity was on the attack. Inside his flagship, Commander Zorl stumbled back as the ship shook violently. Sparks flew and alarms screamed. "What just hit us?" he roared, his sharp voice echoing through the bridge. "Commander," a panicked officer shouted, staring at the screens. "The human ships, their weapons, they've evolved. They're breaking through our shields." Zorl's glowing green eyes widened. "Impossible. Humanity doesn't have this level of firepower." Another explosion rocked the flagship, sending alien officers tumbling to the ground. The bridge lights flickered. Zorl clenched his fists, his calm confidence replaced by fear. "This was supposed to be easy," he growled. "Destroy them." Now, in Earth's orbit, hundreds of human warships pushed forward. Leading the charge was the Valkyrie, the Vengeance Fleet's flagship. Its sleek, black body cut through space like a predator. At its helm stood Captain Alvarez, a hardened soldier with a scar running down his cheek. His eyes burned with determination. "Fire all weapons," Captain Alvarez barked. The Valkyrie unleashed a barrage of laser fire. The energy beams smashed into the Council warships, ripping through their defenses. One alien ship exploded in a ball of fire, its debris scattering into the void. The humans cheered. "We've taken out a Council ship," an officer yelled. Captain Alvarez smiled faintly. "This is just the beginning." In the hidden Earth bunker, General Marcus and President Hayes watched the battle unfold on giant screens. The room was tense. Officers stood silently, their eyes glued to the live feeds. "Status?" President Hayes asked. A communications officer looked up, his voice steady. "The Vengeance Fleet is holding its ground, Madam President. We've destroyed 5 Council warships so far." General Marcus nodded. "Good. The Council underestimated us. That's their mistake." President Hayes leaned closer to the screen. "And we'll make sure they regret it." The Council warships were massive and powerful, but they were slow. The Vengeance Fleet moved with speed and precision. Smaller human ships darted around the alien giants, firing at weak spots. Explosions lit up the sky, turning the battle into a storm of fire and light. On board the Valkyrie, Captain Alvarez monitored the battlefield. "Alpha Squad, focus on their engines," he commanded. The smaller human fighters zipped forward, firing their weapons at the Council warship's engines. With a loud boom, one alien ship lost control and began spinning out of formation. "Another ship down," an officer shouted. The humans roared with triumph. Inside the Council's flagship, Commander Zorl slammed his fists on the control panel. "How are they doing this?" he hissed. "They're just humans." "Commander, we've lost 7 warships," an officer reported, sweat dripping from his gray forehead. "Their technology, it's advanced." Commander Zorl's face twisted with anger. "Enough." He pointed at the screen showing the Valkyrie. "Target that ship. Destroy their flagship." The Council's remaining warships turned their massive cannons toward the Valkyrie. On board the Valkyrie, alarms blared as enemy ships locked onto them. "Captain, they're targeting us," an officer warned. Captain Alvarez didn't flinch. "Divert all power to the shields. Hold the line." The Council warships fired. Giant beams of red energy tore through space, slamming into the Valkyrie's shields. The ship shook violently. Panels sparked. Lights flickered. "Shields are holding, but not for long." "Steady," Captain Alvarez shouted. "We will not fall." Back on Earth, people watched the battle from screens in their homes, streets, and shelters. Children clung to their parents. Soldiers stood still, fists clenched. For the first time in days, they weren't afraid. They were proud. A little girl whispered to her father, "We're winning, right?" Her father nodded, his voice full of hope. "Yes, we're showing them what it means to be human." In space, the Vengeance fleet fought with everything they had. The Valkyrie's shields were weakening, but they kept firing. Human fighters swarmed the Council warships, distracting them and forcing them to spread out. "Focus fire on their flagship," Captain Alvarez ordered. The smaller ships obeyed, aiming all weapons at the Council's command ship. On board the Council flagship, Commander Zorl's eyes widened as his ship's shields began to crack. "No, this can't be happening," he shouted. A massive beam of energy fired from the Valkyrie, hitting the Council flagship. The explosion was blinding. The humans cheered. The Council's flagship had been crippled. Commander Zorl stumbled as the lights went dark. The alien officers looked at him, their faces full of fear. "Commander," one whispered, "they're stronger than we thought." Zorl gritted his teeth. "This isn't over." He turned to his officers. "Fall back. Regroup the fleet." The remaining Council warships turned and fled, disappearing into the darkness of space. On board the Valkyrie, the humans erupted in cheers. "We did it," an officer shouted. "They're retreating." Captain Alvarez allowed himself a small smile. This was just the first battle. The war isn't over yet. He turned to his crew. "Prepare to pursue. We'll show the Council that humanity doesn't bow to anyone." As the Vengeance fleet regrouped, the humans knew one thing. They weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for revenge. The Council strikes back. After their first victory, humanity was on a high. The battle with the Council had been a success. The Vengeance fleet had sent a message. Earth was no longer weak. But what they didn't know was that the Council was far from finished. In the heart of Council space, Supreme Leader Theric watched the defeat unfold on his monitors. His face was stone cold, but inside, his rage burned like a wildfire. "How could this happen?" he growled. Around him, the Council's high-ranking officers stood silently, afraid to speak. "Prepare the Second Fleet," Theric ordered, his voice ice-cold. "We will crush these humans once and for all." His officers nodded quickly, knowing that the Supreme Leader would never accept failure. The Council's forces were vast, but now, The humans had proven themselves capable of standing up to them. Therak would not let that stand. Back in Earth's orbit, the Vengeance fleet was ready for their next move. The humans celebrated, but deep down, they knew the war was far from over. The Council would retaliate. It was only a matter of time. Inside the Valkyrie, Captain Alvarez sat at his command center, staring at the screens. The damage to the Council fleet had been significant, but their enemies would return with even more strength. He could feel the tension in the air. "Report," Alvarez said. "Sir, we've received a transmission from Earth," an officer replied. "It's from President Hayes." Alvarez's eyes narrowed. "Put it through." On Earth, President Hayes stood in her war room, a dark expression on her face. The victory had been sweet, but she knew that nothing was certain. The Vengeance fleet had only scratched the surface. "Captain," President Hayes said over the transmission, "we've just received troubling news. The Council is regrouping. They're assembling a massive fleet, far larger than anything we've seen before. This is their retaliation. We need to be ready." Captain Alvarez's jaw tightened. "We're ready, Madam President, but I suggest we don't wait for them to attack. We take the fight to them." "Agreed," President Hayes replied. "I'll prepare the Earth Defense Forces. You have permission to strike first." Meanwhile, in the vast reaches of space, the Council's second fleet, an armada of over 300 ships, prepared to launch. These ships were larger, better armed, and more deadly. The first attack had been humiliating for the Council, but this time they would show no mercy. Commander Zorl, still recovering from the damage to his flagship, watched the preparations. His eyes were filled with hate. "Commander, we're ready to engage," an officer said, standing beside him. Zorl grinned, his fangs showing. "This time, there will be no retreat. We will hunt down every human ship and destroy them. For their arrogance, they will pay with their lives." The Vengeance fleet didn't waste any time. Within hours of the Council's new fleet being spotted, Captain Alvarez ordered a counterstrike. "Prepare for a long journey," Alvarez said. "We're going deep into Council space. The battle will be hard, but we will win." The human warships sped through space, heading straight for the Council's new fleet. Every officer aboard knew what was at stake. They were fighting for their planet, their homes, their families. But what they didn't know was just how fierce the Council's retaliation would be. Back on Earth, General Marcus paced in the war room. "This is it," he said quietly. "This is the turning point. If we win this next battle, we show the Council that humanity can't be beaten." But deep down, he knew the odds were stacked against them. The Council was ruthless, and their forces were overwhelming. They had no idea what kind of weapons the Council had developed in response to the humans' surprise attack. As the human fleet approached the edge of Council space, Captain Alvarez gathered his officers. "Listen up," he said, his voice firm. "We may be outnumbered, but we have one thing the Council doesn't have: our will to fight. The Council thinks they can scare us, but they don't know us. We will strike them hard, and we won't stop until we win." His words filled the crew with determination. They were ready. No matter what came next, they would stand their ground. And then, in the silence of space, the two fleets collided. The battle was like nothing humanity had ever seen. The Council's ships were massive, with advanced weapons that tore into the Vengeance fleet's smaller vessels. But the humans fought back with everything they had, pushing through the fire and destruction. Captain Alvarez's voice rang out over the intercom. "Focus fire on their flagship. Take out their command ship." The human ships surged forward, their weapons blazing. The Council's flagship, a colossal structure of dark metal, loomed ahead. But before the humans could reach it, a deadly surprise came from the Council's side. A massive energy pulse shot from the flagship, slamming into the nearest human ship. It exploded in a burst of fire. "We've been hit," a crew member screamed. "Shields are failing." Captain Alvarez's heart pounded. He watched as several of his ships fell under the onslaught. The Council's weapons were devastating. But there was no turning back now. Humanity had launched this war, and they would fight until the bitter end. The tides of war. The battle raged on. Explosions lit up the dark expanse of space as the Vengeance fleet and the Council's forces clashed in a deadly dance of destruction. The sheer scale of the conflict was unlike anything humanity had ever faced before, and it was clear this war would decide the future of Earth. Captain Alvarez stood at the front of the command deck, watching his fleet engage with the Council's overwhelming forces. His mind raced. The Council's weapons were far superior to anything Earth had, but humanity had something the Council could never take away: determination. "Report," Alvarez barked. "We've lost 3 ships, Captain," a crew member responded, voice shaky. "The Council's new energy weapons are devastating, but we've taken out 2 of their smaller ships." Alvarez nodded grimly. "Good. We can't stop now. We push forward, no matter the cost." Meanwhile, in the heart of Council space, Supreme Leader Theric paced furiously in his war room, watching the progress of the battle. He had expected this to be a simple victory, but the humans were proving more resourceful than anticipated. "Report," Theric demanded, turning toward his officers. "The human fleet is pushing harder than expected," one officer replied. "Their smaller ships are taking heavy losses, but they're still relentless. We have to finish them before they cause any more damage." Theric's eyes narrowed. "We will destroy them, but we need more firepower. Increase the power of our flagship's weapons. I want it to be the last thing these humans ever see." Back on Earth, President Hayes watched the battle unfold from a hidden command center. She clenched her fists as she saw the reports come in. The human fleet was being pushed to its limits. But she wouldn't give up. Earth's fate was in their hands now. "Send a message to Captain Alvarez," Hayes ordered. "Tell him not to back down. We have one last chance to turn this around." The communications officer nodded. "Aye, Madam President. The message is sent." On the battlefield, Captain Alvarez received the message. His eyes hardened as he read it, feeling the weight of the President's words. "This is it," he muttered. "No turning back." He turned to his officers. "We have one last shot at victory. We need to take down their flagship. If we can destroy that, we can break their fleet." The crew nodded in determination. They knew the risk. Taking out the flagship would be no easy task. But it was the only way to end this war. The Vengeance fleet pulled back for a moment, regrouping. The battle had reached a critical point, and they needed a new strategy. Captain Alvarez's mind raced as he considered the options. A direct assault on the flagship was too dangerous. But what if they could use the Council's own tactics against them? "Prepare the stealth fleet," Alvarez ordered. "We're going in through the back." On the Council's flagship, Commander Zorel stood at his post, watching the human ships from his command center. He smiled grimly. The humans were persistent, but they were nothing compared to the might of the Council. But his smile quickly faded as he saw a new development on his screen. "Commander, the humans are." Before he could finish, the stealth fleet of human ships appeared from behind the flagship, moving quickly and silently. The Council's sensors couldn't detect them in time. "What?" Zorel shouted. "Alert the fleet." But it was too late. The human ships unleashed a barrage of missiles, targeting the flagship's weak points. The explosions shook the massive ship, and sparks flew from its damaged systems. "Direct hit," one of the officers shouted. Zorel's face turned red with fury. "They're here. All units, defend the flagship." The Vengeance fleet pressed their advantage, moving quickly to strike the Council fleet's weak spots. With the flagship now in danger, the Council forces faltered. Ships that had once been invincible were now showing signs of damage. But the Council wasn't done yet. Theric's voice came over the comms, loud and clear. "Do not let these humans defeat us. We will show them what it means to challenge the might of the Council." Suddenly, the flagship's weapons fired once more. sending a massive energy pulse through space. The shockwave hit several of the human ships, knocking them off course and crippling their weapons. "Captain, we've been hit," one of Alvarez's officers shouted, panic in their voice. "Hold steady," Alvarez ordered. "Get us back into position. We have to finish this." Back on Earth, President Hayes watched anxiously. She knew the humans were holding their own, but it wouldn't be enough unless they could strike a decisive blow. She could only hope the Vengeance fleet would succeed. In the depths of space, Captain Alvarez's ship shook as another blast from the flagship hit them. The crew scrambled to keep the ship intact, but the damage was mounting. The Council's retaliation was fierce, but Alvarez refused to give up. "We're almost there," Alvarez said, determination in his voice. "Prepare for one final assault. This ends now." With a roar of engines, the human fleet surged forward, targeting the heart of the Council's flagship. The final showdown was here, the final battle. The tension in space was unbearable. The human fleet, battered and bruised, pushed forward with relentless determination. The Council's flagship loomed large, its weapons glowing with destructive energy. The humans had come this far, and there was no turning back. This would be the final battle. Captain Alvarez stood on the command deck, his eyes fixed on the main screen. The Council's flagship, once a symbol of their might, was now a crumbling behemoth. It was only a matter of time before it would fall. But the cost of victory would be high. "Report," Alvarez demanded, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. "We've lost 4 more ships, Captain," a crew member called out. "The Council's flagship is putting up a strong defense, but we've disabled their outer shields. We just need one more push." Alvarez nodded. "Keep pressing forward. We can't afford to let up now. This ends today." Meanwhile, aboard the Council's flagship, Supreme Leader Therak was furious. The humans had taken more of his fleet than he had anticipated, but the battle was far from over. The humans were running out of time and ships. They would crumble soon enough. "Commander Zoral," Therak growled, his eyes burning with rage. "It's time. We will destroy them all with our final weapon." Zoral nodded. "Yes, my lord. We have activated the energy core. Once we fire, nothing will stand in our way." Therak's lips curled into a cold smile. "Prepare for the final assault. Humanity's time has come." Back in the thick of the fight, the human ships struggled to maintain their positions. They were taking damage with every passing minute, but Captain Alvarez's voice echoed over the comms, inspiring his crew. "Keep pushing. We fought too long to stop now." The crew rallied behind him, determined to finish what they had started. The Council's flagship was within reach, but the weapon they feared most was still active. The final energy pulse that would wipe out everything in its path. As the Vengeance fleet drew closer, Captain Alvarez realized they had only one chance left. A direct assault would be suicide. They needed to hit the flagship's core, the source of its power. If they could disable it, the battle would be won. "Deploy the fighters," Alvarez ordered. "We need to make a hole in their defenses. Give us a way in." Fighter pilots scrambled into action, darting through the chaos of explosions and energy blasts. The sky was filled with streaks of light as human and Council ships collided in fiery destruction. Alvarez's heart raced as he watched the fleet move into position. On the flagship, Commander Zoral watched the chaos unfold. He knew the humans were getting closer to their target. His eyes darted to the console, where the final energy pulse was about to fire. "Zoral, we cannot lose this battle," Therak shouted, his voice full of fury. "Fire the pulse now, or all is lost." Zoral's hand hovered over the controls. His heart pounded. They were moments away from victory, but the humans were pushing through his defenses. The time to act was now. "Ready the pulse," Zoral said, his voice calm but his hands shaking. He had to make this count. As the fighters launched their attack on the flagship's defense grid, Captain Alvarez saw the opening he had been waiting for. Now, he shouted. With a roar of engines, the Vengeance fleet charged forward. Every ship focused on the flagship's weak spot. The final energy pulse fired from the flagship, a massive surge of power that sent shockwaves through the battlefield. The humans scattered, doing their best to avoid the blast. But it was too late. The human ships had already made their move. They slammed into the flagship's hull with all their remaining force, their weapons aimed at its core. A massive explosion tore through the Council's ship, sending shockwaves through space. The battle paused for a moment. Silence fell over the fleet as the Council's flagship began to break apart. The humans had done it. They had destroyed the heart of the Council's might. But the victory was bittersweet. The loss of so many ships weighed heavily on Captain Alvarez and his crew. The Vengeance fleet had won, but the cost had been great. "We did it," one of the officers whispered, her voice filled with disbelief. "Not yet," Captain Alvarez said. "We have one final task. We need to make sure the Council never threatens us again." The remaining Council ships, now leaderless and crippled, began to retreat. Their once powerful fleet was now in shambles. They had underestimated humanity, and now they would pay the price. As the Vengeance fleet regrouped, Alvarez looked to the stars, his mind focused on the future. They had won the battle, but the war was far from over. "Take the fleet to Earth," Alvarez said. "We have to be ready for whatever comes next." Back on Earth, President Hayes watched the victory unfold on her screen. Her heart swelled with pride, but she knew the victory was just the beginning. The Council had been beaten back, but they weren't gone. They would return, and when they did, humanity would be ready. The aftermath and the next battle. The battle had ended. The Council's flagship was a smoldering ruin, and the Vengeance fleet had emerged victorious. The stars above Earth were quiet, but the damage caused in the wake of this war was still very much alive. The cost of victory was steep, and the scars left on humanity's heart would never truly fade. Captain Alvarez stood on the bridge of the flagship, gazing out into the vast emptiness of space. His thoughts were heavy. The Council had been defeated, yes, but the galaxy had taken notice of what humanity was capable of. The question was, would it bring new enemies or allies? "We've won, Captain," his first officer said, his voice tired but proud. "The fleet is in disarray. We've broken their hold over the galaxy." Alvarez didn't reply at first. He simply stared at the flickering images of the Council's damaged ships, now drifting in the cold, silent void. "We've won this battle, but this war is far from over," he finally said, turning to face his crew. "We may have destroyed their fleet, but we've made enemies of the galaxy, and we have to be ready for what's coming next." Meanwhile, back on Earth, President Hayes watched the results of the war from her command center. She couldn't help but feel a sense of relief that the Council's forces were no longer a threat to humanity, but she also knew the victory had come at a high price. "We've beaten them," Hayes muttered to herself. "But the galaxy won't forget this. Humanity has shown its strength, and we will have to defend that strength with everything we have." A communications officer entered the room, handing Hayes a report. She read it quickly, her face hardening. "The Council is retreating to their home system," the officer reported. "But we've intercepted a message. They've sent word to their allies. There are other factions in the galaxy who may see humanity's actions as a threat." Hayes clenched her fists. "I thought this war was over. Are we really going to have to fight again?" Back in space, the Vengeance fleet began its long journey back to Earth. The journey was quieter than it had been when they first left. This time, they were not heading to war, but to regroup and prepare for whatever came next. As the fleet entered Earth's orbit, Alvarez's communications officer spoke up. "Captain, we're receiving a message from the Galactic Coalition." Alvarez raised an eyebrow. The Galactic Coalition. This was a neutral body, made up of many species from different parts of the galaxy, all working to keep the peace. What did they want now? "Patch it through," Alvarez ordered. The holographic projection of a galactic coalition ambassador appeared before them, her expression serious but not hostile. "Captain Alvarez," the ambassador said, her voice calm, "we are aware of the destruction you've caused in the galaxy. While the Council may have been an oppressive force, your victory has sent ripples throughout the stars. We have been asked to meet with you to discuss the future of humanity's place in the galaxy." Alvarez's gaze hardened. He could feel the weight of the situation. Humanity had proven itself capable of war, but what would happen when they had to face the political tensions of galactic diplomacy? "We're ready to talk," Alvarez replied. "But know this, humanity will not stand by and let any force threaten our people again." The ambassador nodded. "Then we will see how your strength holds up in the court of the stars." Back on Earth, President Hayes looked out over the city skyline. The war was over, but there was still much to be done. Earth had been scared by the conflict, and rebuilding would take time. But humanity was stronger than ever before. She knew that the Council was only the beginning. There were other factions out there, waiting to see how humanity would respond. Some would want to make peace, but others would want to test humanity's resolve. Captain Alvarez stood before his crew one last time, preparing for the next steps. Their victory was complete, but now they had to face the aftermath. The galaxy was watching them closely. "We've shown the galaxy that we are not to be underestimated," Alvarez said, his voice filled with resolve. "But we must remember, strength is not just about winning battles. It's about standing together when things get tough, and we will face whatever comes next with that same strength." The crew nodded in unison, knowing what was at stake. As the Vengeance fleet prepared for its next mission, the future of humanity was uncertain. The war had been won, but the fight for humanity's place in the galaxy was just beginning. Would they become respected allies in the galactic community, or would they be seen as a dangerous threat? Only time would tell. But one thing was certain: humanity had proven that it was strong enough to fight back, no matter the odds. The Council's betrayal had awakened a force the galaxy was not ready for. And now, humanity stood as a proud and powerful force in the universe.